Thanks again for watching our last episode with my great brother Howard Frank, and here I am, Saul Frank, to thank you guys for coming to watch the next episode where you're going to hear something new and exciting, and I'm not going to tell you about the man to my left, but you're going to hear all about it in the next episode. Welcome back to CETV with the Soul Man Frank, and a huge thanks again to my wonderful brother Howard, who was here on our last episode. So today we're going to be talking to this amazing gentleman. Ralf Schubert is a drone enthusiast. He has used all kinds of drones. We've got them on the table, but I wanted to hear his perspective about the new FPV drone. So we gave it to Ralf to test recently. Ralf, I want to ask you, thank you for coming in. How long have you been flying drones for?
So I've been into model aircraft and remote control vehicles pretty much my entire life, and I discovered the unique perspective that drones can give you with your videography and photography about 3 years ago, and transitioned into full freestyle style drones around a year ago.
Are you working professionally as a photographer?
As a photographer, yes, automotive photographer.
Cool. Doing much video?
I've always dabbled in video and helped friends out with video, but I'm starting to transition more into freestyle FPV edits.
Why? Like, what would any of these give you over any other videographer?
So, unique perspective, a point of difference. The biggest thing about these is I can go anywhere. You can look at anything you want to. You can get up nice and close to it. Lots of proximity through small gaps. And you can do 200 k's an hour sitting still with no risk of harm to yourself.
Awesome. And I know to the left there, before we get onto this beautiful beast, the new DJI FPV racing drone, we've got the Mavic 2 Pro there. So DJI, that's quite a famous model from DJI, the Mavic 2 Pro. So what does that do for you? Why would a videographer want to use that one over, say, one of the smaller racing drones?
So the Mavics come into their own when you talk about longer range, longer flight times, stabilized footage, amazing videography and photography potential. They can help out in all kinds of avenues where normally you'd have to pay for large gimbals and more expensive means of capturing footage.
Even choppers and Cessnas, which
That's
are still
right,
used
for
with
movies.
medium format and stuff, but then
That's
these
correct.
take it to another level.
So these are simple. You can take them with you traveling, you can pull them out, fly them anywhere within the confines of the law, and get amazing footage that you
Check your local country.
check all your local laws and be aware of CASA's regulations of where you can and can't fly. But it's basically just opened up the market to a whole bunch of people that haven't been able to afford to get into it. Yeah. They are more affordable and they are a higher quality. They do supply just better all-round capabilities than what was available earlier.
We've been selling drones for a long time, and they started off at this price point, and now they're more entry-level, where affordability for all kinds of people. My son's got a little $100 Tello, and then we've got also like $2,500 Mavic 2 Pro. So there's lots of different reasons for lots of different drones.
And they suit specific skill levels and needs. Like you have the Mavic Mini, which is perfect for a sub 250 gram drone. Nice and stable in inclement weather, wind, and you can pack it up in your pocket and take it with you traveling anywhere. Then you step up to the semi-pro, I guess you'd rate the Mavics.
Yeah, before you get into the Inspires.
Before you start getting into
like
the
that.
Inspires and start spending serious money on it. The DJI kind of, the FPV.
Yes. Tell me about the FPV. He's dying to tell us. I thought we'd give you a little teaser, a little intro into everything else. Tell us about this. Why did DJI bring this out?
So this drone,
from your point of view, mine as well.
Yeah, in my point of view, it's got a very unique spot, and it is amazing to fill that gap in the market. So essentially, when you decided you wanted to fly FPV and move on from something like the Mavic, which is pretty quick for a commercial available drone to the public, you started having to look at building or buying a somewhat more custom kind of quad. So we've got a couple of different ones here.
Tell us about the toys.
This one here, real estate
Serious
photographers, videographers, people that want to document their travels, amazing stuff. This one here is a Cinewhoop. Now you can build these kits yourself with your own components, or you can buy them. The problem with these is you need a massive capital investment to be able to test the waters. You essentially spend a lot of money not knowing how you're going to go with it.
Yeah.
These are generally flown FPV with a small camera in the front, which you view through your goggles, and then you attach something like a GoPro, an Osmo, or an Insta360, something similar in an action camera to the top of the drone. Your battery sits in behind it, and this one's a little bit more protected with the ducts. They are much louder because of the ducts, but if you want to fly in and around buildings, people, get some unique footage, mainly cruising, this would be the step that you would go to. So it's kind of close to where that one is.
And just for some of the viewers at home, so we mentioned FPV a few times. What does it stand for?
FPV's first person view. Basically, we use goggles, which are transmitting a signal from the front of the drone onto a screen. You have zero spatial awareness of what's going on around you. You're entirely focused on what is happening in front of the drone.
Should he put it on?
I think everyone knows how they go on.
No, we want to see it just like a...
So essentially, you have... The DJI unit is one of the only digital options available on the market today, and it's amazing. I've actually just swapped over to the DJI setup for my freestyle and racing drones. The digital image, much better than the analog equivalent, which we've been flying for the last few years. Analog is like GWN with a busted antenna at 320p, skipping ants all over the screen, and every time you go behind something you lose footage for a couple of seconds, which isn't ideal when you look at something like this, or like the racing drone on the right, which is capable of speeds over 200 k's an hour in a controlled environment, of course, because we fly legally.
I mean, and the FPV is going, they say, about 180 k's an hour?
They say it'll do 89 miles an hour or thereabouts, and
in k's about, yeah, about
in k's about 150 to 160.
My math could be a little off.
It's much quicker than the Mavic. It's much more stable, but it kind of fits a different role. Yeah. It's kind of stuck between.
So it's actually nice for people because they've got options now.
They do have options. Yeah. The fact that you can fly this in normal mode and acclimatise yourself to getting into a drone, or if you're familiar with the controls of the Mavic Mini, any of the other DJI
So it'd be much
drones.
easier for someone who wanted to try something faster to go from a Mavic into FPV. They've grown up sort of with the DJI system.
And the fact that it's got some babysitting, it helps you out. It's not relying entirely on your skill as a pilot to be able to get good footage.
So this sort of stuff is more next level. You're building it yourself, and
this stuff here, as a general rule, you can set these up, albeit at a cost, to fly the same way as the DJI product. But these are a custom build.
Yeah. Whereas this is
Things
out of the box.
go wrong with custom builds. Yeah. Out of the box, reliability.
Turn it on
proven.
and you're racing straight away.
You turn it on, you plug it in, you get longer flight time. It's safer. You've got return to home features. You've got GPS tracking, which you can add to these in a custom build.
Right.
But they don't integrate as well as a package from a manufacturer that's ready to go.
I must say, from a build quality point of view, it does feel amazing.
It's very well built. Looking at it from a different perspective, a freestyle pilot, it's very heavy. I don't know how it would go crashing into the ground, and I tried my best not to crash it. But
Thank
it
you,
is,
by the way. Thank you for that.
It's in one piece.
Mentioned to me a few times I might crash it.
We had to ask the question because when you start manually controlling something, there is always the chance you're going to crash. These freestyle drones are made out of carbon fiber. They are built to crash. They are designed to crash, and you will crash. If you're not crashing, you're not flying it as you should be flying it.
I don't know. It's the opposite. I don't know too many clients that want to crash their drones.
None of us want to crash it, but you get some pretty cool footage when you're hurtling into the ground from a massive dive at a couple 100 k's an hour.
No, sounds fun, but I don't think I'll be getting too many people wanting to do that to this one. What did you love about it? What was the favorite thing about it?
Now, keeping it in perspective, there's lots of things I love about this. When you look at this for what it is and what it offers, there's lots to love about it. You have a normal mode and you have sports mode. Sports mode gives you a little bit extra speed. It can correct the banking in your turn. In a manual drone, you have to control a few parameters while you're turning. So you yaw and roll at the same time and balance them to get around corners. You get it wrong, they hit the ground. This thing, in normal and sports mode, you can concentrate on where you're going and adjust to the first person view before you start having to basically let go of the reins and hope that you don't hit the ground or get it wrong. This can be an expensive learning exercise. This is a very gentle transition into that, and I
coming off of like any of your other previous
coming
DJI
off the
products.
other stuff. Like I do have Mavics and other drones similar to this that I have
Because
used.
DJI have been out for so long, there's many people that would
They
have
have,
some version
and-
of a DJI at home.
And they are very, very good at what they do. They put a lot of effort and time into developing a product that is user-friendly with an easy-to-use interface. The phone apps and everything else to be able to control it, set paths,
Easy to
all the rest
load,
of it.
set
They're
up.
fairly easy. The fact they support their products with software, firmware upgrades. You can buy accessories, and there's enough people on the market with them that you can print your own accessories if you've got access to a 3D printer.
Wow.
Where this really comes into its own, it kind of fits in somewhere between the Cinewhoop and the Mavic. And we'd say it's a little bit behind the freestyle drone for full-blown freestyle. Where it's kind of suited is if you're into your adventure sports, you want to ride your mountain bikes, go out with your friends. The Mavic's got accident avoidance. It's not going to let you go into certain gaps. It's not
Follow
gonna,
me mode.
It's got follow me mode, but when you start
You
getting
don't
into
get those
trees,
in custom, do you?
we can interface that. It is a little bit more complicated.
But not out of the box.
I have no interest in that in these drones. They're made for a different task. And when you compare that to that, there are massive differences between it. But we look at this for what it offers, and the fact that it bridges the gap. You can go from this, you will be able to fly that. If you're in the market to buy a Mavic, but you think you might enjoy first-person view, it basically fills that gap perfectly. It gives you a really good taste. It has the capabilities of the Mavic, and yet it still pushes towards getting you used to first-person view, the motion, the fact that you're standing still and there's some mad happening in front of you in your goggles.
Beep. We said we wouldn't do that, but that's all right.
So this one here, when you look at something, it's a gateway drug. Essentially, it's a gateway drug, and it's brilliant to fill that particular gap. It's very much a niche. There's not much around that kind of gets you.
It's a very different
halfway
look to all their
between them.
previous drones.
It is.
All the
And
Mavics have a similar look and feel. This
That's
looks a bit
correct.
more futuristic and cool. And
This is not designed to be super convenient to chuck in your backpack and take with you on a trip. This is made for when you plan to go out and fly. Like you're going to actually make time, find a location.
Make an awesome video with
You're going to
speed
go
and-
out and you want to actually get something cool. You might be into extreme sports, and it offers a unique perspective.
Now, I know some of the footage you shot with this. We're going to ask Z, our producer here, to put some of that into the video.
Yep.
And you get to see some of that, so that's probably going to roll in a second.
If you get motion sickness, you might want to sit a little bit further back from the screen, because from a freestyle perspective, we are spending a bit of time upside down and spinning and moving around in directions that your head's going to struggle to comprehend initially.
So it's just like being part of the photo industry for many years.
It's like sitting still on a roller coaster. That's essentially where it is with freestyle.
Talk to me about this remote. You said this one that comes with the FPV, or is designed to use with the FPV, is a bit different to the other DJI remotes. What's different about this one?
Functionality-wise, it's very much the same, and I have to say that my favourite thing about this entire combo is actually the controller. And if I could fly my normal quads with this controller, I would genuinely look at upgrading. So I'm using a DJI FPV camera system in this. We're using the Nebula Pro. It is digital, and there is a larger box type remote that DJI offer, which interfaces with that, which means you don't need a separate receiver or transmitter in your drone to be able to use it. This also gives you the ability, if you're flying in normal or sports mode, to self-center the sticks, so it's going to feel much the same.
Yeah, I noticed that one's springing and bouncing back, and the other one isn't.
This one, they've actually given us the ability by removing the flaps on the back, depending on which mode you want to use. And in the goggles, you can select which mode you need to use. You don't have to actually buy the drone in mode 1, mode 2, mode 3. What the modes are a mixture of which side the throttle is on, and which axes are moved by which stick. So I fly mode 2, which is fairly common for freestyle pilots and racers, where I have the throttle on the left stick. With freestyle, we always want to be able to go to 0 throttle. If you have it returning to medium, depending on the power of your drone, well, a lot of full throttle, but we need to transition between full throttle, and no throttle.
Nice.
Because if we're always on full throttle, the thing flies away and it's cost you a bit of money.
And you probably lose battery quick.
And you're going to use a lot of battery. You've got to use a lot of battery at full throttle. So in normal mode and sports mode, you'd normally leave the stick self-centering. You just simply use, I think it's a 2.5mm hex. You screw it clockwise to take the resistance off, so it will
Don't try that at home.
Return to the bottom. It will not go back up. So if you're trying to swap between modes, you have to be very aware of where your stick is. We'd always suggest you have a play around, and DJI actually have a simulator which you can connect the drone, the goggles, and the remote, and actually have a practice in full manual mode before you go out and risk your drone. So spend some time in a simulator. Even with these things here, you spend time in a simulator before you go out and fly, or it becomes a very expensive, short-lived hobby.
Yeah, so it's like anything. You have to have training, learning, understand the purpose of what you're actually going out there to do.
That's right.
And then talking about some of the other cool stuff, like
the coolest thing
still
on
loving
this
the
remote,
controller.
there's a couple of really awesome features which have been covered by other people. Your modes are accessible by a switch on here. Now, when you go into full manual mode by default out of the box, it is still in sports mode. You need to go into the goggles and you can turn off an angle limit. You can have what's typically referred to in this kind of drone circle as acro trainer mode by default, which will allow you full manual control, but it won't allow you to roll completely over. It will maintain, I think it's about a 30 to 50 degree kind of angle from center to make sure that you're not going to slide out of the air, because it's not going to try and right itself.
Okay.
Now, the most amazing part of it, in my opinion...
What would happen if that was on Mavic or something like that?
On a Mavic, well, because you don't have a manual mode, it would just tip, and every time you let go of the stick, the thing returns back to level. This drone, in manual mode, if you move the stick to the right and let go of it, the drone goes to this attitude and then falls out the sky. It will not correct itself in manual mode until you correct it.
Right.
People
this
will
is the
crash
sort of things
these.
I think people need to know, because it
That's right.
gives it completely different interface to how those run.
The best thing about this system, in my opinion, for someone looking to go from the Mavic or instead of a Mavic, because you can still take photos and video on this like you can with a Mavic, you're restricted in the camera angle, like your gimbal. You're not going to get down to vertical, looking straight down on it,
the ground. Yeah.
but you're very close to it at 60 degrees from zero. The beauty of this, in full manual mode, it all goes bad. Literally press that button once and the thing self-centers and sits.
That's cool.
Pause.
That is very
You'll
cool.
see in the video, there's actually a section where I go completely inverted, upside down, and let the drone fall. And then I hit this button and it self-corrects, locks in, and sits
He
there
didn't
for
tell
3
me any
seconds.
of that. It wasn't disclosed. I wouldn't have loaned it to him. No, I would have anyway.
So, yeah, it's really cool. And then there's another perspective which we don't get to do with these.
Something else you did you weren't meant to?
No, this one's fairly normal. When we fly with these, the problem and the difficulty with it comes with trying to get footage. You're trying to match the angle of the camera. So you're constantly trying to frame whatever you're looking at, which when you're going slow, it's very hard to maintain this kind of attitude with the drone.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to travel forward, or you drop throttle and it's trying to drop out the sky. The camera angle's fixed for the most part when you're flying. So when you take off to when you land, the camera stays in the same angle unless you hit the ground. Now, when you're traveling forwards, you get a nice frame. As soon as you turn around backwards and start traveling backwards, we're now looking at the sky. So you get a whole bunch of unusable footage.
And you've only got so much battery life, so you can't be wasting footage.
Well, you can't be wasting footage, and you've only got so much actual physical life if you crash them, so you don't want to be wasting your time in the air. The remote also gives you control over the gimbal while you're flying. So
that's also unique to this model.
That's
not
unique
in
to this
other
one. Yeah,
DJI
we
drones.
don't. You can still pan on the other other drones, but not. They don't have a manual mode. So where it really comes into its own is if you're trying to maintain a 25-degree angle like this, and then you turn around and go backwards, you can now pan while you're traveling backwards and still frame your shot, which we've not been able to do. A lot of the footage that we normally get, I was a bit sedate in the footage we've done with this because I only had this for a short period of time and I really didn't want to be that guy that crashed it.
And we only just got them. I don't want you to crash it.
So we spend a lot of time going through gaps backwards because it's cool. Yeah. So we look at sky a lot, and you also lose a lot of travel because you have to change the attitude, which makes you come forward again. with the DJI drone, if you've got good spatial awareness and the appropriate place to fly it, you could indefinitely fly backwards, and the gimbal will correct and look the direction that you want to frame it. So it does give you a lot of unique perspectives that you can capture that other drones of this type and that type kind of miss out. So it is
So
really
they have made the
fuzzy.
right decision. They've filled a gap.
They've filled a gap that didn't exist. Some people would say it didn't need to exist, but I believe it has a place from my perspective. When you look at what it offers, and it's a gateway into full freestyle. If people are going to go out, I don't know anyone that has one drone that's into freestyle drones. Everyone's got multiple drones. I have 2 of these exactly the same because I plan on breaking one every time I go out, and I don't want the fun to stop.
Normal.
I don't want the fun to stop, so I have a backup, and then I have a backup for the backup. And then we've got, for different roles, we've got the Cinewoot, which is a bit safer for moving around people. Then we have a bare frame here in a racing drone, which is a whole other kettle of fish. These are like the Formula One of the drone world. These things are insanely fast and change directions in a split second. They're too much for me, which is kind of funny when you see the footage from that one. I can't handle these. These do my head in.
Too fast.
Something that I have to get better
controlled.
with. Yeah. A lot of guys fly them a lot better than what I do, but I've been concentrating on getting footage more so than going as fast as I possibly can through gates and stuff.
I mean, considering it's got a bit of weight and it's quite a solid, awesome unit, how does it go with battery life? Does the weight, I mean, is the battery very different because these are so much lighter?
So these typically run, so my build runs a 6-cell battery and they're around 1100 milliamps. So we're more concerned about weight. The all-up weight with a GoPro and a battery in this is around 700 grams. It's a bit of a porker. This one's just shy of 900.
Actually, I thought it would have been more.
They're reasonably heavy.
That's solid, actually.
Yeah, they're reasonably heavy.
I like that it's solid.
DJI have some of the best battery technology on the market. And I mean, this, I just want to be clear, I am not a DJI fanboy, as Saul can attest. They make wonderful products.
No, it's a good raw review. I just wanted to hear from someone that uses all kind, not DJI only, but is also using DJI and more from the idea that of a drone category. This is such a new path for DJI to take. I wanted to understand a bit more about it. So
where I'm at is I think this is
more.
going to bring new people to the hobby that wouldn't have the opportunity because it's such an expensive hobby to get into and you can't test the water cheaply.
Not at Camera Electronic, it's not.
But these drones, you're basically buying a remote controller, you're buying the drone, you're buying the goggles, and you have to commit to the entire setup before you can test the water. This gives you a taste of it. So even if this isn't for you, you still end up with a drone capable of doing what the Mavic can for around the same money. I think they're actually cheaper than the Mavics.
They are, yeah.
So they're cheaper than the Mavic. It gives you a little bit more control. I see
You're
this
right.
as perfect.
You have to buy both, actually.
You have to buy both. You can't just have one. You can't have one of any of these, as you can see. Like these are my dailies. There's the stuff that I normally run. But yeah, it's very unique in where it fits in the drone kind of categories. And I think they've done a really, really good job of building a drone that kind of bridges the gap because it gives you a taste without having to commit entirely. And then if it doesn't work out being for you, you still have a usable drone to do your videography and photography. And you want to change your friends through trees on a mountain bike or in a kayak down rapids. I'd do some pretty silly stuff with this. I'm not overly confident with a custom built drone flying very low over water for long periods of time.
Yes, we talked about this off air.
This is where this would kind of come into its own. One, because it's not mine, it's Saul's.
Uh-huh.
I would have no issue flying this very low over water.
I know where to send the invoice.
It still has a return to home feature, so if it does all go bad...
Did you set it to my address or yours?
It's going to be set to mine, so anyone who uses it will come pick it up afterwards.
Sounds good.
But you can bail out. So this has no safety net. If something goes wrong, you're into the ground, you're into the water, you're potentially losing the drone completely. We're flying these line of sight, of course, so like legally line of sight, we're going to find it eventually, but it's much harder to find. This has return to home. It all goes wrong, you hit the return to home, it comes home again. And you've got that pause. If you are trying the FPV, try it a bit higher, like at the tree canopies or a bit higher, so that if it all goes wrong, I think it was about a second and a half to correct it from completely inverted, which isn't bad. I mean, if you're this far off the ground like we generally are with these at a higher speed, it's going to minimize the damage. But if you are flying above trees, over the water, it all goes bad, or you just forget.
Which a lot of people want to try that stuff.
You have a brain fart and you hold the stick a little bit too long and the thing rotates. You hit the button, it rights itself, it sits there and waits for your next command. I think it paused for about 3 seconds. And that is a godsend if you're getting into drones. You do not want to crash your drone. You don't want the fun to stop. Battery life. Now,
yes, we were going to talk about that previously.
From every other review I've seen, around 20 minutes of hover time in normal mode. Sports mode and manual mode, most people that I've seen in reviews, they're getting around 8 to 10 minutes. I did try and push it as hard as what I was willing to, as you'll see in the footage. We spent a lot
We're
of time...
excited to see that footage, because I know, I've seen it, the viewers will love it. It's very different to any of the other FPV review footage we've seen.
It's a very unique perspective. It's a roller coaster sitting still. But I spent a lot of time at full throttle and inverted and all kinds of weird angles.
You're talking about with the drone, right?
With the drone, that's right, yeah.
Could have been anything.
I was getting around 4.5 minutes to 6 minutes of pretty heavy freestyle.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is still pretty good considering these here would range with the same kind of throttle movement, the same kind of moves. It all happens a little bit faster with these, but 2.5 to 3.5 minutes out of a charge is pretty typical.
If you get in between 4 and 6.
4 and 6 on that, most people are going to get longer.
Yeah.
Most people are going to get longer.
But you were
This
hammering.
wasn't mine. I didn't pay for it. I went a little bit harder than the average guy would.
I'm wanting all the comments to start coming in from customers saying, can I buy it cheaper? No, we have to hold on to it for a bit longer.
So, yeah. And if you put like-for-like battery power in this, it would still get shorter battery time, flight time, sorry, because they're just a different beast. Anyone who's comparing it to this, it's not really a fair comparison.
No.
This is made specifically for one task and one task alone, which is why just what I brought in today. There's three
I was happy to
drones.
have the conversation. I wanted to hear from someone who's doing this stuff. There is a community out there. I know about it. They have clubs and they're building this stuff.
I feel people have been a little unfair on this because they're not looking at it for what it is. And again, I'm not a DJI fanboy. They make really great products.
But they've been selling well. And I was surprised that from a price point of view, it's actually a bit cheaper than the Mavic 2 Pro.
The positives, in my opinion, are the camera. The picture itself, the dynamic range is very, very good for an action camera, let alone a drone camera. If I could get that camera in that form factor and replace my GoPro...
And on a gimbal.
We'll get to that. If I could replace my GoPro and my flight camera and have something that's a little bit easier to set up and protect, because you'll notice on this camera we've got little bumpers because when you hit stuff front on, they do break. So being able to get that form factor but get this kind of quality without having to buy a GoPro and then strip it down, or buy an Osmo and strip it down. They get caught in props a lot because we hit the ground a fair bit. So I love the camera, but I feel like the letdown on the camera is the flares every time you head into the sun. It's manageable, and an ND filter would go a long way to fixing that. I have to review it the way that I flew it, and I flew it as it is. So it's not entirely fair on it, but there are other cameras that handle a little bit better. The gimbal, I did not stabilize the footage. The footage is as it came off of this. I didn't play around too much with the stable because I don't necessarily run stabilization on my GoPro. So
you had jittery hands.
I didn't have jittery hands. So
he was so excited when he opened that FPV, mate. Don't let him fool you. He was like, oh my God. And he still get holding the
I still really like it, and I can't wait until you give me this one in a few weeks. But yeah, the gimbal lets it down a little bit because the gimbal does have a lot of jitteriness. Now, we fly in WA. WA is a windy city. There is always wind around. It's the photographer's curse. Every time you set up a big octobox or something and the wind tries to blow it away. Flying the drones, you're 20 metres above the ground. you're from the ground level up to 20 meters, 30 meters. We typically try and fly freestyle drones at the tree canopy. We're not flying at 120 meters, which is the limit.
So how many meters are you talking about, roughly?
Around the 20 to 30, so you start really feeling wind that you don't feel on the ground. So that could be aiding that, and the stabilization may be able to overcome that. But just in the footage that I captured when I used it flying the way I normally would, which I thought would be a fair way to evaluate it, there is a bit of jitteriness in the gimbal. The footage is very good. The dynamic range is very good, and I'd love to have another play with it with an ND filter. I mean, I've got an ND16 on the front of this. I switch between an ND8 and an ND16.
But
even
so
at
many
night
drone
time,
operators do.
They do, and the DJI system's amazing. The fact that you're not playing with non-tempered glass that breaks if you flick it or touch anything. It's not a perfect solution, but because these are a consumable item in this drone, every component on here is a consumable item. The propellers are made to be able to bend them back. You will get chips and nicks. Buy extra propellers for this if you're going to fly in manual mode. If you start flying proximity, you're going to touch stuff.
Is that a sales plug?
It's
for camera electronics.
You guys have got plenty of. You're going to have to keep plenty of propellers because the closer you get to stuff, I'm sure guys with the Mavics they're exactly the same.
Chip, people do.
They take off in thick grass and the thing hits
normal.
it. So there is a little bit of a skill gap between flying something that flies itself essentially, or can fly itself, to moving into manual mode. The way you're taking off, you take off with a lot of extra throttle. This does have turtle mode. Turtle mode I didn't play with because...
I haven't heard of that one, actually.
So turtle mode on typical drone will allow two modes to spin in the opposite direction. So when you crash it and land upside down, you can select turtle mode usually via a switch, and you can flick the thing over so you don't have to go and walk. And then you're closer to the ground, you get caught in grass or sticks or whatever you crashed into, you take off, you damage props. The tune on these is adjustable. We basically play around with what are called PIDs. PIDs are separate to rates. Rates are the rate of rotation. This is set very slow. I'd hazard a guess that out of the box they're around 320, which makes for smooth flying. But when you start trying to do rapid movements, you're going to have to play around with your rates. And then you start noticing the PIDs. The tune in it is... Just keep in mind, this is from my perspective flying these, where I can vary the tune. This flies very well with zero prop wash. I'm very fortunate to have a friend that is very good at tuning these, and he helps me out with it.
And when you say prop wash
is when you change angles. So if you come in from a dive and go in a different direction, you'll get fluttering where the quad tries to move around trying to level itself and get some air back in under the props.
Did you try that with the FPV?
I did, and I tried it without even trying it, and it does suffer prop wash when flown in full freestyle.
Yeah.
There's going to be very
no
few
different
people.
than to these.
No different to these. This one, we can tune it out, and we've got to keep in perspective, it's not apples for apples. These are made for heavy freestyle. These are made for manual operation. There is a massive difference. If I flew this like this, they'd be very much the same. And if I flew that like I'd fly... Well, no, because if I tried to fly that like this like we did, you notice some shortcomings. Yeah. That will be up... I'm sure they'll come up with a software or firmware update, which will allow you to play around with that a little bit. Or as they develop it and more people are flying it at different skill levels, they'll adjust that accordingly. But when I try and fly this like this... Yeah. It's not designed to do that. So it's not really a fair comparison. But this is just what I notice getting used to flying this and then jumping into that.
Because any real review, as you say, it can't always be,
glowing,
positives
positive.
and roses.
There are going to be things...
If there was some things for people to be aware of, which we won't say they're negatives, but things for them to be aware of that could be improved upon, in the future, what improvements would you make?
I've said it a couple of times. This drone, looking at it...
Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you.
This drone, looking at what this drone is designed to do, in my opinion, is just about bang on where it needs to be. Right. There's not an issue with this that concerns me until you start comparing it to custom-built drones.
It depends what you're comparing it to.
We're investing time and money building these from scratch to make them do a very specific task. This is a unit that comes out of the box with a warranty. You can go and buy batteries. Like, we haven't even talked about the drama with LiPo batteries that we have to go through when flying these. We've got special battery chargers. We have to play around, charge them at the right ampage. They catch fire when you crash. Right. They can burn your house down. Like, you've got to treat these things with kid gloves. So it's not like these don't have drawbacks either. These are hobbyist grade. This is consumer grade. And the fact that I could grab this out of the box, and to be honest, if I had this in my arsenal, I would probably take this away with me if I was going camping or if I was going hiking or something.
Super cool stuff.
Do some really awesome stuff. And
which mostly we've seen cinematic in some of the reviews. So you'd be actually going out camping and doing cool stuff, racing up and down the river because you'd be flying over water.
And then we've got a
on canoes and jet boats.
A massive, massive pro, which kind of makes it for most people, is the fact
pros
that
and cons, not positives and negatives.
I can't give this to Saul and expect you to get this in the air and keep it in the air. There is no way I can set this up.
No, I'll probably sooner end up burning the house down. Or burning the shop down, wait for the fire start.
You couldn't fly this chasing me, walking or hiking up a hill. I could take this with me and I could give this to my nonna and she could fly this chasing me. And that's a huge difference when you're trying to get into something that you can enjoy with your friends and family. Yeah. I could let my kid fly this. I could let my partner fly this. Saul could fly this. His children, his wife, anyone that you hand this to with a really, really minor amount of training can fly that. Okay. But then I can still fly that in full manual and have all the control I want over it. And fly it in that
fun, fast, full throttle.
I can essentially do
a novice can pick it up and go full throttle.
Essentially, yes. If they're willing to put the time into learning it, they could. This covers the
quicker
entire
than learning
skill
something
gap.
Custom.
Yeah. It covers the whole skill gap because if you do have a scary moment, you've got safety features to self-level. You can pull out of it. You can put it in normal mode. It's literally one button. You literally hit the panic button. That one right there, and the thing self-levels.
The reason he knows is because I gave it straight to him, and I didn't even get a chance to use it. That's how he knows.
But so when you look at it for what it is, it's an amazing product, and it really fills that gap nicely. There's no comparing this directly to anything else because nothing else in the industry kind of
even anything else in the DJI range, really.
No. Yeah. It's very unique in where it fits in. So comparing it to other products is very, very unfair. I would happily have one because there is certain tasks where it'd be better. Say you want to buy something to document an installation at work. You want to go through, you want to survey, you've done, I don't know, you've got this set up out in a forest and you're taking behind the scenes footage, right? And then you're chasing someone in a car trying to get some nice cruisy footage. The Mavic will do it, but the Mavic's going to try and find some space to be able to do it in a tree canopy. Yeah. The fact that you could give this to anyone that's on site and have them fly around and get that same footage with a little bit of training and maybe a few
and the fun of using the goggles.
And the fun of using the goggles. You can be so much more accurate with the goggles. You're actually seeing where you're headed rather than guessing.
So you don't get goggles with the Mavic too?
You can use some goggles with this.
I know
think
some
the
people
racing
do,
series,
but not generally speaking.
But yeah, generally people don't because of the investment. When you break it down, so into components, let's say you build one of these, $500. You buy a radio, $200. You buy the goggles, $900.
So it's
you're much the same, but if you want to be able to hand this to someone and have them take footage off you, it's a no-brainer. Like it really is a very unique product for a very saturated market. I mean, there are lots of alternatives for videography, photography drones.
No, it was amazing how many people were running and grabbing them like straight away, immediately.
And there's so many options in the custom. You can buy these pre-built. You can buy them in kits and components and build them yourself. Cine whoops. There are hundreds of cine whoops. There are hundreds and hundreds of racing frames. There's only one of these that kind of does what this does and does it as well as it does. So when we forget that we're comparing it to what we used to, which is both sides of it.
So you're a converted fanboy, but we're not allowed to talk about
that. We're not going to discuss
I'm teasing him. But no, when someone who has a serious passion for drones, it sounds like you really actually did put it through its paces. You know what it can do, you know what it can't do.
I didn't want to
And even
like
knowing all that, you would still actually find a reason for it in your system.
I think it has a place in a kit. Yeah. It's a flying laptop. It deals with all the complicated tasks that we normally have to rely on.
Is that painted? comment? The flying laptop.
It's a flying laptop. It's almost a flying fridge with the weight of it. But
And
buy one of
still
these,
has many minutes of flight time.
Yes, it gets great flight time. Not many people are going to fly it as hard as what I was flying it. Get the Fly More kit when you come to Camera Electronic and pick up yours. One battery kind of sucks. Like, you just start having some fun and, 20 minutes of fun, and then you have to wait for
The
it to
Fly More
charge
kit's
up.
like the other
The
Fly More kits. 2-3 batteries, charging
an extra
hubs,
couple of
props.
batteries. I think comes with a 3 battery charger, so you can charge up all of them. You definitely want more than one battery. 3 batteries, I would say, would be a really, really good amount to get a solid day of flying.
Stupid amount of fun.
You're going to have a lot of fun with it, yeah.
Awesome. Man, I think we've covered everything we can think of. I want to hear some questions. Please send some comments, send some feedback, and we might get Ralf doing more with the old flying laptop. So thanks so much for coming in, Ralf. Thanks a lot, viewers.
Thanks
See you
for
soon.
the opportunity.
Cheers.
See you again.
Sorry, that was Thomas Lee. He's sitting on the creaky chair and he's causing all kinds of trouble. Speaking of Thomas Lee, I'm honoured to have him here. He's sitting just off camera. He's the store manager of Wanderlust by Camera Electronic. Now, this is in the middle of the Hay Street Mall. We've got all kinds of toys there. Maybe we'll even get Ralf testing the flying laptops inside the store, which we're not allowed to say or do, but we do have cool Segway e-scooters. Maybe we can have Thomas Lee racing one of the new Segway e-scooters down the mall and you chasing him with the FPV drone. What do you think?
As long as it falls within the CASA regulations, I'll be more than happy to... Disclaimer.
So seriously, love to see your comments and feedbacks about any other product review videos you'd like to see. Check out wanderlustperth.com.au for some of the cool toys that are in there, and we can get a few of our clients testing those as well. Want to hear from you? Send in some reasons why you should be the next Ralf Schubert to test our products. And again, it's a huge thank you to Ralf, who's actually a real-time user out there in the world using all this cool gear, and we want to see that from you guys. So we've got scooters, skateboards, surfboards at our new store. We've got our other 2 stores, Camera Electronic on Sterling Street and Murray Street. 2 great websites, cameraelectronic.com.au and wanderlustperth.com.au. Ralf, is there a DJI tutorial site that can help people with some videos themselves?
There is a dedicated site, DJI Tutorials on YouTube, which cover the operation, firmware upgrades, everything to do
Just
with...
Google that, DJI Tutorials.
If you jump on YouTube and just search DJI Tutorials, I believe that is the name of the channel, and they have information on how to pair and update all the individual components. They are very smart, which means you do need to do some maintenance from time to time with your firmware updates. And it'll walk you through setting up the drone, operating the drone, how to use the Fly app, I believe it is, which has the simulator.
Or just go see one of the guys at Camera Electronic. I know Thomas Lee and Wanderlust Perth will be happy to help you set up your app on your DJI drone. And we have a wonderful technician here, Daniel, who's been with us for 15 years. He can do firmware upgrades. He works out of our Sterling Street store upstairs in his workshop there. So we keep him locked up in the workshop, so you'll always have someone to do the firmware upgrade on your DJI drone. And we're just really lucky here. You know, we work with a lot of cool product, cool tech.
There's a lot of exciting stuff coming up.
Do you know how many subscribers we've got on YouTube? Trick question.
I'm not sure.
Under or over 1,000?
I would say it'd be about time to do a giveaway for the next milestone, wouldn't it?
We do have to do something. So what about flying, literally the word flying, off the cuff here? Let's give away a $100 SanDisk memory card. The person that gets to 1,000 and buys a drone gets a $100 SanDisk memory card. So I want to see it. I'm going to keep an eye on it, and I'll know who you are when we get to 1,000 subscribers. $100 memory card when you buy a drone. Cheers, people.